He felt rather than had her walking. She was a surreal vision of beauty and elegance, and she would belong to him very soon. That he could take solace in. "I am not getting into this excuse for a car with you," he grinned. "Sweetheart, this is a Ferrari, not a car." "Well, I don't care. It is too small, the road is too rugged, and you drive too fast." "Would it help if I promised to drive slower?" "No," she answered him. He got up and walked to a board where car keys were hung. "Good for you. I am feeling agreeable this morning. And thank Uche for having the good sense to keep his car keys here," he said, and took out a key, pressed the keypad, and an SUV's headlamps blinked twice. "Better? Much better," she smiled at him and walked over to the SUV. She got in and threw her overnight bag to the back seat. When she turned again, he was in the car. He grabbed her seat belt and leaned forward to belt it for her. Helen sucked in her breath. How she wanted to plant her fingers into his hair and feel the strands she knew would be silky. She had to fold her fingers to stop them from giving in to that very urge. But that didn't stop the delicious warmth that slowly spread all over her body. He finished the task and looked at her with eyes that had gone several shades darker. "I thought I could resist," he said as he devoured her mouth. Helen melted against him. She had thought she could resist. She had thought she could fight it. But how did one begin to fight something so bigger than you? A feeling so powerful that she couldn't tell how it began or how it would end, and yet it was all she needed. He slowly put her away. "Good morning," he smiled at her. Helen was speechless. She could only stare at his smiling face. "You are a drug, Helen, and I am addicted. Good thing addictions can be fought. Honestly, are you willing to fight it?" he asked, staring at her with so much intensity. She drowned in it. She couldn't think. She couldn't give him a reasonable answer. Her mind was clouded with the strength of her feelings for him. Helen couldn't have denied it if her life depended on it. How could she, when she stared at his lips, needing it once more on hers? And without thinking, she drew his face back to hers and kissed him. Helen didn't have memories of kissing or being kissed, but there and then she could answer she was a very wonderful kisser. She put her all in the kiss, and she saw a light explode in her head, floating in tiny pieces. If Chuck was surprised at her boldness, there was no time to show it. He only knew he loved it, and for the first time in his life, he knew how magical the manly satisfaction of cupping the woman you crave with your last breath, devour your lips hungrily as you do hers. He thought as he was being transported to a new world on the wings of a tempest. He couldn't get enough of her. He couldn't get close enough to her. So he took over the kiss and kissed her hard and fast. Maybe he would get enough, but so strong was the feeling that they abruptly stopped kissing and held on to each other, their breath heavy as they floated back into their bodies. Without a word, he moved over to his side, each afraid to think about what had just transpired between them, each afraid of losing control, each afraid of the pains it might bring, because at that instant, there was no denying it anymore. They belonged to each other. The ride to town was a silent one. They were both lost in their thoughts. Helen chanced a peek at him. He was frowning with concentration as he drove. She wondered what was going on in his mind. What was he thinking? Or more importantly, what was his decision? She could feel he was making plenty. There was no how one could experience what they shared without coming to a decision. Helen was making decisions of her own too. Only that none of her decisions seemed right. All that seemed right was to stay away. No, she said to herself. She was not staying away. It wasn't possible anymore. If there was a chance that they could be together forever, she would take it. She would risk it. It was better than forever wondering what could have been. If it didn't last forever, if it didn't work out, or if loving him brought the worst pain, it was better to have tried than to spend an eternity wondering, because she was sure the love she had for him would transcend death. She knew from the strength of her feelings that she would rise with it at the end of time. Nothing this strong can be destroyed by even death. I need directions to your house, she heard him ask. She saw the city limits and lights, and it dawned on her that he would see where she lived. She was not afraid of him seeing her house. She was more afraid of the condition of her house. Would he take one look at her empty one-room apartment and guess the truth that she was hiding, that she didn't want to form any kind of attachment to the place, so that living would not be difficult when she finally remembered? Right or left? He asked again. I don't want to keep you with your mother in town and all. I can get a cab from here. The only way you'll be getting out of this car without me getting to your house would be taking you to mine. She stared at him. She knew it was useless arguing with him. What would it be? Personally, I would prefer taking you to mine. Right, she muttered. Not that she didn't want to go to his house. The truth was, she could hardly contain her excitement at the prospect. She also knew she had to apply wisdom. She had to play her cards well and smartly if she was going to come out of this the winner. Chuck took the turn that brought him to her street and let out a low whistle. What is this? He asked himself. The backyard of the whole state? What is she doing here? I don't get it. He turned to her. Don't get what? She asked me fully well what he was talking about. Is it that Mma doesn't pay you well enough? Or you are one of those ghetto children that never leaves? First of all, this is not the ghetto, and not everybody can afford to live in mansions. But you can afford to live in a more decent place, he stated the obvious. Maybe I like it here. Have you stopped to consider that? Yes. I would too if I was hiding or don't want to be found. The rest of what she was going to say got stuck in her throat as fear took over. Did he know? Had he somehow deduced her reason? Which of the houses? She turned back to him. The next one. I give you points for taste. It is the best on the street. He parked the car and turned to her. Helen fumbled with the seat belt and handle at the same time, suddenly overcome with fright as well as excitement. He leaned over and helped her untangle the mess she had made of the seat belt. She murmured her appreciation and turned to him and smiled. So I would have asked you to come in, but my house is a mess and I don't want you to keep your mother waiting. Very considerate of you. The only reason I won't come in is I want to make mindless love to you, but something tells me we are both not ready. He leaned over and kissed her, then pushed the door open for her. Helen came down on shaky legs. She walked to her door, then turned and looked at him. He was still watching her, so she rummaged in her bag for her keys, opened her door and walked inside. As soon as the door closed behind her, Chuck started the car and drove off. He heaved a sigh. He had plenty of time to deal with his feelings for her, plenty of time after he dealt with his mother. Helen walked to the window and watched him drive off. Then she slowly sank to her feet, feeling odd and confused. She looked at her house with new eyes. It was empty really, except for her flat screen, sound system, and a couch. There was nothing else in it unless one counted the curtains. She looked at the room the way Chuck might look at it, and shook her head in disgust. It wasn't too late, she thought. She could always do something about it before she would allow him to call on her. She walked into her bedroom and pulled off her clothes. First, she was going to book an appointment with the doctor she found through her research, and then she was going to sleep. She was here to say a malady that sleeping didn't help, even if it was a malady of the heart. Then she stopped. That sounded like a saying she had heard somewhere from someone very close. Even as she thought about it, the memory was receding fast into that dark abyss she could never seem to reach. Determined more now than ever, she searched her bag for her phone. She was going to get to the bottom of this and regain her memory no matter what it took, she vowed to herself. Chuck parked and came out of the car. With each step he took, his temper seemed to be increasing. He walked to the door and opened it. The hallway was quiet. He wanted to go to his suite so he would have time to get a hold on his increasing rage, but a glance in the living room changed his plan. He slowly walked in and found his mother lounging on the couch, the remote control in her hands. He watched her. She looked okay with all the booze and weed she consumed. She looked better than he thought she would. So why was she in his house? They had a deal. As long as he sent her money, she would stay away from them. "What are you doing here, Pat?" he asked before he could stop himself. The woman slowly turned and looked at him. "Is that a way to talk to your mother?" "I only have one woman I call mother, so I ask again, what are you doing here?" To his chagrin, she began to laugh. "Rose? No matter how many times you call her mother, she's never going to be your mother. I gave birth to you, carried you for 9 months. I am your mother, and you are going to have to accept that soon. Don't blame me for calling Rose mother. You sold me to her. What was your asking price again? 50,000 naira. You ran to her first. I only did what? Do you even remember how I met her?" She smiled. "Don't pretend that you didn't like all the attention you were getting from all those other girls at the brothel. Don't pretend that all they taught you was wasted. Even now, your reputation as a lover precedes you. I was 10 years old. You were my mother, and you pimped me to your depraved friends who were curious about a green-eyed half-caste. And that was not even the worst of what you did to me. You are not a mother. So I ask again, Pat, what are you doing here?" "I came to see my sons. We had a deal. I pay you and you stay away from us, and keep your mouth shut about what you are to us." "Well, that deal is over. I would have another contract drawn up." "What is it? You want more money? I can call my lawyer and we would have another contract drawn up. You want a brothel built? I would do that so you would leave us alone. Do you ever consider the fact without me there will be no you? I got pregnant with you at 14. A pregnant 14-year-old prostitute could have aborted you like the rest of her friends were doing. You should be grateful to me for keeping you and not bowing down to the pressure to abort you. Pat, please leave. I will tell you what I want, and if you don't accept, I will go to the nearest blogger and tell them who I am, and I can assure you, I will spare no details." At that moment, he wanted to strangle her. He watched her smile. Yes, she was a beautiful woman. Yes, she had been the most sought-after girl in the brothel where he lived with her for the first 10 years of his life, but she had the most wicked and evil mind he had ever seen. "What do you want?" he asked through gritted teeth. He was prepared to give her whatever she wanted. To keep her mouth shut, and keep her far away from him and Collins. She stood up and walked past him and then circled him. I understand you still have some weeks left of your holiday. What has that got to do with anything? Patience, my son, is a virtue. She smiled at him and walked back to her seat. I will spend the remainder of your holiday with you and Collins. We will all get to know each other. That is what I want. No, never. You are saying I should go to the social media? He stared at her with so much hatred. I don't care anymore. Leave my house. If she goes, I go with her, Collins said behind him. Chuck turned to face Collins. His worst nightmare was coming to pass. That one day his mother would come between him and his brother. He had always known Collins never loved their mother the way he did. You don't know what you're talking about, he said to Collins. She wants to get to know us, and I think that it is right we give her that chance.